Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Housing Matters, the Rental Housing Association of Washington's podcast. My name is Corey Jelseth. I am your host and the External Affairs Manager for RHA. You'll notice the Capitol building behind me. It is
Sunny Day.
So it is the last day of session. So in addition to the Housing Matters podcast, I have kind of a legislative session in review after my interview for this week's episode. So stick around after my interview for a wrap up of all of the efforts down here in Olympia this year. I want to thank all of our members and other organizations who came down to testify virtually and in person. And we had well over 1,000 people email lawmakers, make phone calls, and really made their voices heard down here this year. And you made the difference. My interview for Housing Matters this week is with Bellevue City Councilman Jared Nieuwenhuis. We speak about housing in Bellevue and what they are doing to address the housing crisis and affordability, and really same story all over the place, the low inventory for rental housing in our state. All right, well, Bellevue City Councilman Jared Nieuwenhuis, thank you so much for joining the Rental Housing Association of Washington's podcast, Housing Matters. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. Generally, I like to start the podcast with kind of just telling our listeners a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, and kind of how you found your way into politics and all that.
Yeah. Well, actually, I'm an import from Canada. I actually was born in Vancouver, British Columbia.
All right.
But went to high school in Redmond. And I've always considered a Pacific Northwest home. It's the larger Pacific Northwest, Cascadia, if you will. But Bellevue's been my home since about 2001.
Okay.
It was one of those things I hadn't really set off to really run for public office, but it was really just an organic progression, if you will, Corey, where I was just involved in my neighborhood association, and then that led to me being on the boards of a couple of nonprofits that dealt with homelessness or women experiencing homelessness, and also on a board of an organization that addresses domestic violence. And then I got on some city boards for parks and community services. And well, as anyone can tell you, when you're out and about in the community and you've taken an active interest in your city's future, it's only a matter of time before people start, tapping you on the shoulder and saying, "Hey, have you ever thought about running for public office?" So my time came in 2017. And, I had some just terrific mentors to help me along the way. And I ran for an empty seat because Kevin Wallace of Wallace Properties used to have this seat. So he was instrumental in terms of recruiting me. And then I ran for a seat, and I was lucky to have the confidence of Bellevue residents to vote me in. And I was just reelected in 2021. So I'm now in my second term.
Very good, very good. And so I kind of like to say, councilman by night and on city events and everything. But by day, you actually work in communications and marketing. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. No, absolutely. So I've been in the video game space for quite some time, but also just kind of in the general, mobile or internet-based, digital-based entertainment. And it's been great. I mean, the worlds are very, very different, obviously. But I've really enjoyed my role in terms of marketing and communications for these types of organizations that are just putting out great content. They're not the Grand Theft Autos of the world or anything like that. We're putting out games like Nancy Drew, for example. A little bit more wholesome that actually teaches kids great skills in terms of how to investigate, critical thinking, how to solve puzzles. These sorts of things that actually really benefit society.
It's a very needed avenue of video games.
Absolutely. So very different worlds, but somehow I've been able to make it work. But you're right, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because a lot of people don't understand that. Bellevue City Council is a part-time council.
Yes.
Officially.
Yes, officially, right.
However, when I first got started in this gig, they were like, maybe 8-10 hours a week. It is
Sure.
way more.
Yep.
Yeah, it is way more than that. Let me tell you, it truly is a full-time gig, and I think anybody on the council. I mean, I can't speak for everybody, obviously, but I think most of them would admit that this is very much a full-time position. So I like to say I have two jobs.
That's a perfect way to put it. Yeah, I think the only full-time council I think in the whole state is Seattle. I think that's.
I believe so.
Yeah,
I believe so.
Tacoma I know has been tossing around a little bit, possibly making it full-time, but I agree, and I think state legislators probably feel that way as well. You know, that
sure.
it's part-time. You know, during session, and
it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Well, it's a lot of work if you want to do it well.
Right. Yeah, and if you don't want to do it well, why would you? Yeah, why are you going to take the step and do it? Exactly.
Exactly.
No. So I know you are a cyclist when you have the time. I used to do that quite a bit myself before. I have 3 kids now. And
I figured with the bike hanging from
yeah.
the ceiling over here
right.
that your audience can't see right now, but it's hanging right over here.
Yes. My kind of main road bike, I have a specialized Roubaix, and
nice.
so I used to do a lot more long distance stuff with that, and now it's occasionally when I get the time, or sometimes commuting to work. But what about yourself?
A Trek Madone is my ride.
That's what my dad rides. Yeah.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's a great bike. Of course, when you're a cyclist, you're always looking at that next ride.
Of course.
Yes. But it's been it's great. You know, I am a big cyclist, and it's kind of in my Dutch genes, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So it kind of comes with the territory,
mm-hmm.
but really enjoy it. Like you, it's hard to find the time. You know, when you've got 2 jobs, when you've got family, and all the pressures around that, and all the meetings around that, and then being so out in the community, it's really hard to find time. But I usually try and squeeze at least 1 ride in a week.
Hey,
maybe not so much in the winter.
Yeah.
But then I make it up a little bit with some indoor cycling too.
Yes.
Which is not as fun, but at least it keeps you in shape.
It does. It keeps the right muscles toned up, and that way you're ready to get out on the road again when you can. So, so jumping a little bit more into the focus of housing for this podcast. From your perspective, could you kind of give a broad overview of how you see the current housing climate in King County, and obviously Bellevue more specifically?
Sure. Well, I mean, Bellevue's not immune to the pressures and kind of the housing crisis we see all over the state. And, the city certainly is very committed to expanding the amount of housing options for individuals, either current residents or future residents in our city. And that includes affordable rental properties. That includes opportunities for ownership. That's workforce housing. That's family-sized units as well as the single and the studios. Over the years, we've taken a number of different actions as a council. One of them was our adopted affordable housing strategy from 2017. And after only 6 years, we are already surpassing our goals in terms of creating the number of units already. Yeah. Well, it's great. I mean, I guess either two things. We and I wasn't on the council yet at that time, but either we kind of lowballed the goal, or the crisis has just kind of intensified, right, in terms of the demand for housing. I'm sure at the time it looked like a worthy goal and something we could be really proud of, and we are still. But it just shows that there's so much work that still needs to be done. But we're doing a lot of things with our Next Right work as well, which is really trying to just encourage more housing in general, and a lot of that goes to just the development and the permitting process. So now we're just trying to help get through as many permits as we possibly can, and just to expedite that. And then recently we also passed some legislation to allow for more density on faith-based properties as well.
Oh, okay, excellent.
For those that want to, some properties in Bellevue, and I'm not sure the last time you've been there, but they have some of these faith-based properties where a third is being used for their congregation, but then there's 2/3 that is just being unused.
Yeah.
So they want to put some housing on there, and we think that's great. Let's help with that. And then the comp plan, right, which is our once a decade opportunity to really look at, okay, so how do we want to grow as a city, and where we want to put the density, and that density has mainly gone into those growth areas of downtown, which is our fastest growing neighborhood, Bell Red, Wilburton, Factoria. These are the places that we want to put that density, the multifamily housing. A lot of it is transit-oriented development as well. A lot of it's right on the light rail path, which is opening next month.
Yes,
Line 2
yes.
in Bellevue. Of course, you can't go across the lake, but there are. It is 7 miles and 8 stops from Bellevue to the technology center there in Redmond.
Yep.
So that'll be interesting to see how receptive that is. I think it will be, but I don't think it'll really take off, right, in terms of ridership numbers until it gets across the lake.
bridge.
So
Sure.
and that's important for us too, because we've got. Bellevue's a major job center, and we have more and more employees, and not just what you hear about Amazon. We've got employees coming for a lot of smaller companies and startups and other tech companies and non-tech companies. So we really believe in kind of that multimodal approach and providing as many options for transportation as we possibly can.
Absolutely. That all sounds building towards the end goal of what we really need is more housing and more affordable rental housing.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. One of our first correspondence actually was through email with regards to a Bellevue City resident, Jimmy Singh, who is having some trouble, almost going on a year with having a non-paying tenant in his unit. And we actually had him come down to Olympia to testify on a bill to try to add more commissioners to hear eviction cases in King County. And the bill unfortunately didn't even make it out of committee. But what, as far as that process goes, what do you think can be done to really help housing providers in King County?
Well, I think we have to first and foremost have to deal with that backlog of eviction notices or cases. I believe it's over 600 now, at least the last time that I checked.
Sounds about right, yeah.
And it's just a case of my understanding is that the county needs to address that within a 30-day period.
Yes.
And they're just not doing it. And part of that backlog is due to the lack of commissioners and very condensed 90-minute meetings where, and I believe the last time Jimmy went before this commission,
he missed the 90-minute window.
He missed the 90-minute window.
Yep.
Not to his fault or anything that he did, but there's so many cases and they're trying to cram so many cases in that 90-minute window that it automatically got bumped to the next month.
Yep.
That on top of the fact that there are a lot of levers that if a tenant who doesn't have I guess is not intent on paying rent can pull, right?
Yes.
So right away they can say, well, now I want to use the Housing Justice Project. I want to get an attorney through them, even though the landlord has to pay for their attorneys, but they can get one for free. So there are a lot of different ways that, and this is the problem where I think the word is out that if you want to manipulate the system as a tenant, you can do that. And I think a lot of them understand what they can do and can't do. And it's really hurting two things. It's really hurting mom and pop landlords like Jimmy Singh. But it's also reducing the amount of units available in our community, 100%. Right? Because why would they, if I'd be shocked if Jimmy would want to remain a landlord or after this experience, right? He's lost almost a year's worth of rental income. He's still having to pay the mortgage on that house and the taxes on that house. And who knows what the house is going to look like when he gets inside there and see what kind of repairs he might want to do. So because of that, now we're going to this model where only the large corporations are going to be able to afford to operate in Washington State, where they can deal with all the different regulations and more of the regulations that were looked at this past legislative
Yeah, I was going to bring that
session.
up next. Yeah, we'll get to that. Yeah.
Thankfully, a lot of them did not pass,
Right.
but that would add even more of a burden on the landlords to keep up with all these things. And I'll jump into some of these things that were talked about this last legislative session. For example, there's a limit now on what you can charge for a pet deposit.
Yep.
You have to report right away when someone pays their rent on time. Although, ironically, if someone's late, you don't have to report that.
Luckily, those did not, cross the finish line. But
exactly.
the kind of things that are being proposed.
Exactly. Yeah. And then, the worst of them, at least for me, was 2114 and rent control. And don't get me wrong. I understand the burden that some people have, we do, because just recently most recently for 4 years, I was a liaison to the Human Services Commission. I understand housing insecurity is an issue in our city. Absolutely. But I don't believe the way we fix that is to punish property or landowners and make it so difficult that we are actually, because it's actually going to, again, as I said, it's actually going to hurt our ability to create more housing options. And that's exactly what we're seeing.
Yes.
And the fact that, we're now going down this path about rent control, which again has never worked anywhere in the world that's ever been tried. No. But yet here we are looking at it again. And and I get it, as an elected official, you want to you want to solve the problem, right? And again, this is my opinion on this, and it's not necessarily the entire council who feels this way. This is Jared's opinion on this. Yeah. But and I understand the need to solve this issue, but why we want to go back to the well of policies that just haven't worked, I just don't understand. And it's just like I said, it's going to end up hurting our efforts to create more housing, create more affordable housing, and create more options for housing of residents and future residents in our city.
Absolutely. And when we were down in Olympia this session quite a bit because of the big rent control bill, and you talk with legislators and their staff, and you really try to convey this is going to do the opposite of what you think it's going to do. And like you said, I understand they want to solve the problem.
Yeah.
But it's going to do the exact opposite. It's going to push the small people out, and big corporations are going to be the only ones left. It's funny. I haven't shared with you, but I grew up. My parents are small housing providers. They own 4 units in Tacoma. And they texted me like 2 weeks ago or something, asking me a question about Measure 1 that recently passed back down there in November. And they asked me a question, and I said, I don't know. You should probably go talk to whoever your attorney is for this. And they said, we've never had to have one. This is adding all these extra layers to us just being able to provide housing for people.
Right.
And in the end, I think it's going to push some people out, and those that stay, it's going to be more expensive.
It absolutely will. And I think even most impacted will be those that, just have that one single family home. Right. Mm-hmm. Like I just have a lot of friends, they've gotten married. So they live in one of the homes, but maybe the wife's house or the they decide, hey, let's just rent that out, right. Or let's rent out that condo. Mm-hmm. But if they read these stories, that are just, I feel like they're multiplying all the time. Why wouldn't they just say it's not worth it? If we get someone in there that decides not to pay rent, that could put us in real financial jeopardy.
Right. How long can we ride that out?
Exactly, because now we're paying for 2 mortgages, right?
Yep.
And that could really hurt us financially. So why would we take that risk?
Right.
I don't understand why you would right now. So we really need to address that.
Well, Bellevue City Councilman Jared Nieuwenhuis, thank you so much for joining Housing Matters. We really appreciate you taking the time.
Corey, thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure been talking to you about housing issues this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Although a short 60-day legislative session, this year still packed in a lot from Olympia. We had a fantastic turnout from our members and members of coalition organizations for the initial rent control bill hearings, and your support never wavered. A plethora of bills ranging from a limit on pet deposits, B&O tax on rental housing providers, property tax increases, and of course, the aforementioned rent control. Due to the onslaught of bills,
I'm here to support SB 6210.
House Bill 2114.
SB 5770 because it's going to raise the cost of doing business.
House Bill 6210.
The public and our members really turned out to testify. We were joined by current and former elected officials, RHAC members, and concerned members of the public. I am pleased to say every single bill we opposed will not see the light of day this year. We move now into campaign and election season, and RHA will need everyone's continued help to keep fighting the good fight. Donate to the RHA PAC and the RHA Legal Defense Fund so we can all keep up this important work. Well, that's it for this episode of Housing Matters, as well as this session down in Olympia. I hope you enjoyed my interview with Bellevue City Councilman Jared Nieuwenhuis, and I just want to say thank you very much again to everyone who came down and made their voices heard in Olympia this year. You made all the difference. Thank you. If you have a topic that you believe should be covered in a future episode of Housing Matters, please feel free to email at me at my email, chjalseth@rhawa.org. Please feel free to email me if you have any suggestions for topics, or if you think I should be diving deeper into something that is affecting our collective industry together. The views expressed in episodes of RHAWA's Housing Matters podcast do not necessarily represent the views and policies of the Rental Housing Association of Washington. Formal legal advice and review is recommended prior to selection and use of this information. RHAWA does not represent your selection or execution of this information as appropriate for your specific circumstance. The material contained and represented herein, although obtained from reliable sources, is not considered legal advice or to be used as a substitution for legal counsel. Copyright 2024.